Right, good evening, everyone. I think we've got a few more people to join. Thank you very much for logging on this evening. And welcome to our webinar on early years nutrition. Lovely to see so many people are logged on this evening. Really fantastic turnout, and I think we've probably still got some people to join, but we'll just make a start, I think, as we're just a few minutes after 7 now. My name's Caroline Clark. I'm the Head of Operations here at Seymour House. And tonight I'm really delighted to introduce my colleagues from our nursery kitchen, Hannah and Catherine, who are going to lead tonight's session. They are the experts in food and nutrition. So obviously we're going to have a really fantastic session lined up for you today, and hopefully you'll find it really worthwhile and interesting. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we move on. Obviously, if we can just ask for mics to be turned off if possible, please. And obviously, you're welcome to have cameras on, off, whatever you prefer. And just to say, towards the end of the session this evening, we will have time for questions, and we will endeavour to answer any questions you may have. If you did want to put a question in the chat, you're welcome to do that. And as I say, we will look at those questions at the end. So I will now pass over to Hannah, our Head of Food. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Caroline. Do you want to flick to the next slide, Catherine? So, yeah, sorry. I'm Hannah. I head up the food team at Nursery Kitchen, and tonight we're just going to take you on a brief history of the business, a bit around Nursery Kitchen's mission and purpose. I'm going to delve a little bit into recipe development and kind of how we come up with menus, how we come up with the recipes, and introduce the food team. Then I'll pass over to Catherine, who's going to take you through a bit more around nutrition in the early years, a bit more about our menus and celebrating successes. So I wanted to start off once upon a time, like we were reading a story to children, but I won't. So the story started back in 1988, I believe, where John and Julie started Seymour House, and the same year, little Johnny was born as well. And Johnny is our MD of the businesses. And a few more years later, Vicky came along, and that was the full family, and now they're all involved in the business. So 36 years on, I believe, if my maths is right, Seymour House now has 11 nurseries, all outstanding nurseries in Essex and St Albans. Do you want to flick onto the next slide? Yeah, and Seymour House really pride themselves with the best care and education, and I guess one of the big things, like that partners with education is food, and they really identified that this role was really important in children's development in the early years. So about 7 years ago, there was an idea sparked from finding it quite difficult to find really good chefs in this sector that could produce consistent food, that had all the skills of like a nutritionist like Catherine or like a big food team. And came up with this idea of centralising the production of the food, and that's when Nursery Kitchen was started. So a little spark of an idea to really make food for Seymour House as a business, and then a few probably local nurseries in Essex was the idea at the beginning, and then it just got bigger and bigger, and people saw what a great idea it was, and hopefully what great food we were serving, and the business has grown from there. So at the moment we serve about 130 nurseries around from kind of Birmingham down to Bournemouth, so like a real wide range of nurseries, and really proud of what we're doing. And I think it's a really interesting business because I like to see us as like a powerhouse in the early years industry, because we've got a really good food business and an amazing nursery business, and having those two businesses together is really unique in this space, and it really gives Nursery Kitchen lots of insight into how nurseries work and the education side, and then we have the food side, and we can help Seymour House in terms of all the food they're serving and the kind of education and the nutrition. So together I feel like we're pretty powerful, which is a really exciting place to be. So you can skip on from that. So yeah, that's for the business, and from that, over the years we've now built an amazing food team. That 5 really creative women in the food team, from myself, who heads up kind of everything to do with the menus and the procurement, and kind of oversees everything, to Marnie, who's our development chef, and she is creating all the delicious food that your children are eating, and yeah, coming up with all the menus. Maria, who looks after finding new suppliers and ingredients and helping me source, and Marnie source all the things we want to put on the menu. Lisa, who's also on the call, who's our launch manager, who helps us make sure everything runs smoothly and we launch everything on time. And then Catherine, who you'll hear from later on, who's our early years nutritionist, and she makes sure everything's nutritious and delicious. So yeah, now on to our purpose. So making a difference to the lives of children. What we want to do is, yeah, as much as it says there, is to really make a difference for children's lives. We want to feed them really nutritiously and get them really excited about what they're eating, and support their bodies to be active. And we know how important food is in this space, and for kids, and you know, it's so important those first years, and obviously Catherine will touch on it later, but not only from a nutrition point of view, but from an education point of view, and kind of getting those tastes, and just getting kids really excited about food. You know, if you think about, we eat every day, we have so many parts of our day that's surrounded by food, including things like holidays or socializing and social events. So actually what our kind of purpose is creating this amazing food, but our vision is much broader than that, and it's about how do we educate the future generations to make better choices. And we really just want, yeah, kids to get really excited about food, and have that nutritious healthiness, but also, you know, the excitement and passion around food. So that's our vision. So yeah, on to what we do and how we develop. So we have a and we'll touch on it later. We have a 3-week rolling menu, and you'll obviously see when you're getting your updates from your nurseries on what your children are eating. It's a really wide variety of different foods, different snacks, different cuisines. Probably some things that you would say, which is exactly what happens to me with my little boy, they would never eat that at home, but they're eating that in nursery. And I think it's amazing that we have this opportunity in a nursery setting to really get some really interesting cuisines into children's diets, and test things that maybe at home they might be a bit more resistant to, but within the nursery setting, they're much more open to trying all these things. And I think it's quite interesting just to touch on how long these things take. So our process of developing recipes is about 6 to 9 months. And I think some people think, wow, that's a long time, but actually there's so much that goes into, you know, developing all these recipes onto a menu and creating this amazing menu. We actually had our innovation trawl yesterday. So that is the start of our process, where we go out and we look at the market and we get kind of inspired around different dishes and cuisines and kind of what's trendy, and just generally get excited about food as a food team. We also get parents' feedback and the nursery's feedback in terms of what the kids are liking, what they're not. Is there any kind of areas that we're maybe missing from our menu? Yeah, and we look at sales and what's selling, and kind of that's how the beginning of the process starts. Then we go into the kitchen and we start cooking. So it's very similar to what you would do at home. We kind of get inspired by different flavors and cuisines and recipes. We had some delicious curries yesterday, and Marnie, our development chef, will go into the kitchen and she'll just start creating. She'll start cooking dishes, and then Catherine will be involved in terms of making sure that it hits all the nutritional guidance that we need. It's got the right amount of fiber, the right amount of iron-rich proteins and things like that. And then we go from kind of like a 1 kilo cooking up to, you know, scaling up into a bigger production. And then it's kind of like taste. And I think the really lovely thing is we're really focused on how delicious things are, as well as how much they hit, obviously, all the nutritional cues that we need to hit. So we do a lot of tasting and a lot of trialing. And it's very similar to what you would do at home, but just scaled up a bit. And this is our recipe for food love. So these are the kind of 5 things that we focus on when we're developing our recipes. So like I was saying, delicious meals prepared with the best quality ingredients, sourced with kindness, and I'll go into it a bit more in the next slide of what our sourcing principles and how important they are to to us when we're looking at bringing in new ingredients and new proteins. Nutritionally balanced menus. So all our menus are developed by our development chef and with Catherine, but of course they have to be nutritiously balanced, but also delicious at the same time. And then one thing that's really, really important to us is keeping children safe. So we're really rigorous with our safety and our allergen controls in our central kitchen. And then, like I touched on before, we really want to inspire a love of food. So it's not, for Nursery Kitchen, it's not just about making the food and delivering the food. It's about how do we educate children and how do we take them on that journey. And that real partnership with Seymour House is really important. I've seen some of the amazing things that some of the little ones are doing this week on Healthy Eating Week, with all the planting and getting children involved in all aspects of, the cooking and the prepping and the planting, and then the eating. Obviously just creates that passion and love for food, which is what we're really passionate about. And then this is really important to us as well, of making the world a better place for our children to inherit. So sustainability is really important to us. So our sourcing principles are really important. Food waste we know is a big problem. So we have partnered up with a charity called the Felix Project. And they're an amazing charity feeding vulnerable children and the homeless. So any food waste that inevitably you do have in a food business, that then gets taken to this charity, and then it gets given to these vulnerable children and the homeless, which is a really amazing charity that feeds children around London, in Greater London. And then we're also renewable and low energy kitchen, so 100% renewable and 0% to landfill. So yeah, I think we're trying to make delicious food, but there's lots of aspects behind that in terms of nutrition, education, and kind of making the world a better place as well. And on to the next slide. So what you'll find in our meals, so I feel like we're really proud of the kind of cross section of what we're doing. It's really lots of variety in our menus. Got lots of different proteins, pulses and legumes, lots of different carbs, and each of our dishes is full of veg. And I love the way that we're trying to get different veg into children's diets. So in our fish pie, we've got things like fennel and dill and things that you might not necessarily get in other meals or necessarily cook at home, because they're more interesting ingredients. And things like the pea and paneer curry on here, which is an award-winning dish and one of the favourites in the nursery. But again, things like getting paneer into children's diets is a bit different than they may not necessarily get in other areas. We aim for low salt and low sugar. I'm sure Catherine will touch on that later, but we know that's really important. We use higher welfare meat, so all of our meat is UK Red Tractor, so of a really good standard of welfare. And MSC sustainable fish, so all the fish that we use, so our salmon, our cod and our haddock, are all MSC. So that's again a sustainability quality stamp, I guess, just to show how good the stuff that we're using is. And then our tuna is Poland line caught. So again, it's just around not dredging the seabed and making sure that the fish that we're using is well sustainably caught. I know Catherine's going to touch on this later, but something I'm really proud of is our 40 plant points per week. So that really does just show the variety on our menus, and the research, I'm not going to steal Catherine's thunder, but the research says we should be at least getting about 30 plants into our diet a week, and that gives us really good variety and helps our gut microbiome. And we're 40, so you can just rest assured that your children are getting a really, really varied diet. And yeah, they're getting a great variety of all sorts of proteins and legumes and beans. Our menus are also one day plant-based and one day fish, and that again sits with our sustainability credentials. We know as a society we should probably be eating a little bit less meat, so having those days on our menu we feel is really important. And then finally, yeah, we've got a real mix on our menus, from real classic dishes and then kind of flavour, world flavours, so things like moussakas, but then we've also got quite simple pasta dishes, or shepherd's pies and stuff like that. So what we really want to do is just have this real variety of different cuisines, different types of eating, different ingredients, different flavours, just to really get children excited about food and ingredients. And we know Seymour House are doing amazing things on education within food, and we have things like cards where you can talk about different ingredients and like different flavors, and you know what lemon does, and lemon's bitter, and things like this. So there's some really exciting stuff going on alongside the delicious food that the children are eating as well. And I think that's my bit on food and food development. So I'll pass over to Catherine, who's going to talk to you a bit more about nutrition.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. So I'm going to take you through a little bit more about why early years nutrition matters, why we're doing all of this, what's the point, why are we so focused on early years nutrition, and why should we care so much about it? And there's lots and lots of evidence that suggests that the food that children eat in the early years really does matter. And I've got a few sort of extracts of that research and some quotes here for you. So we know that the nutrition that children receive in their first 1,000 days, so that's the point at which the child is conceived all the way up to their second birthday, that's a really crucial period. And we know that the nutrition that children receive in that period can have a positive influence on how they develop, grow and learn, not just for their childhood, but for their whole lifespan as well. And we know that encouraging children to eat well and learn about food in their early years not only protects their health when they're young, but also sets that foundations for future health and well-being. So it's really not just about the food that we're putting on the plate and really taking care of that nutrition, but it is about that exposure and developing those preferences and exposing them to the types of foods that we want them to continue eating as they go through their lifespan. And we know that children's food preferences and eating habits are formed early in life with consequences for a range of health and development outcomes later in life. So this research and these statements are kind of proven time and time again. And there's also a quote from Marian Hetherington, who is a psychologist, professor in psychology, and also has particular interests in child feeding and appetite. And she says, there is no doubt that food preferences established in infancy track to later life. This is an observation that's robust and has been seen in a number of studies. And it's also been evidence that a healthy diet from an early age can provide considerable health benefits throughout life. So that's why we care so much. That's why it's really important that we don't miss this vital window, this early years window, where we have the opportunity not only to try and get children eating the right types of foods, but also to try and shape their preferences, to expose them to the right types of foods, and to start building those healthy relationships with food. Often by the time children reach school age, those preferences are already really ingrained and set. So we've got a real unique opportunity in the early years to actually make a difference. And that's why we're so passionate about it at Nursery Kitchen. And so what we know about the current state of children's health is that we have children who are already starting school either being overweight or obese. So the current data from the National Child Measurement Programme demonstrates that more than 1 in 5, say more than 20% of children are starting school either overweight or obese. And often that is linked directly to their diets and what they're eating and drinking. Dental health is a huge concern, and we're hearing a lot about that in some of the manifestos with the politicians with the upcoming election. And this is a huge area and has been for some time in terms of public health for young children. But a quarter of 5-year-olds have tooth decay, and again, directly linked to their diet. And it's not just one tooth that's been affected with that tooth decay, it's 3 or 4 teeth being affected. And in actual fact, tooth decay is the leading reason for hospital admissions among children aged 5 to 9. And that's because children with tooth decay will have to undergo general anaesthetic to have those teeth extracted. And in the financial year of 2021 to 2022, there were 42,180 tooth extractions in hospital in children, and that cost the NHS £81 million. So it's having a huge impact on children's health, but also the state of our health service and the economy. And all of this can be prevented if we can get to them early with the right types of diets and really helping them to establish those healthy eating habits early on. We've also got lots of research which tells us what children are currently eating. So there's something called the National Diet and Nutrition Survey, and this is carried out by government every few years. And we know from this data that children are consuming too much sugar. So the recommended maximum intake of added or free sugar for a 4-year-old is around 5 cubes of sugar per day. But what this study showed us is that actually the average 4-year-old is consuming 13 cubes of sugar every day. So having almost 3 times as much more than the recommended amount at just 4 years old. And what we see from these diet surveys is that the majority of that added sugar is coming from things like sweetened yogurt, sweetened desserts, sugar sweetened drinks, and fruit juices as well. And so all of this data helps to kind of guide policy, but also this is things that we're really paying attention to when we are looking at designing our menus and looking at our own in-house nutrition standards. We also know from the National Diet and Nutrition Survey that the intake of saturated fat is too high in young children, and the majority of that saturated fat is coming from foods such as biscuits, buns, cakes, and pastries. Children are consuming too little fibre in their diet, too little oily fish, and also not enough fruits and vegetables on the whole nationally as well. So there's some work to be done, and we're really passionate about using the early years to make a difference. We know how important early years nutrition is for the health of children and for our future generations as well. And we know what some of those key areas of concern are in terms of those nutrients and those foods that we've talked about. So nurseries and preschools and earlier settings have a really unique opportunity to make a difference, and to serve the right foods, but also to shape preferences and build those healthy relationships. But they need guidance in doing so. And what we have currently, a little bit of background in terms of kind of what guidance is out there for earlier settings around nutrition. We do have a statutory framework called the Early Years Foundation Stage, which you may or may not be familiar with, but in that early years foundation stage framework, the reference to nutrition simply says this one sentence that we've got quoted here. So where children are provided with meals, snacks, and drinks, they must be healthy, balanced, and nutritious. So it's mentioned in that framework, but actually there's a real lack of guidance to go with that. So it's very much open to interpretation as to, what does healthy mean? What does balanced mean? What do you classify as a nutritious food? So it's really open to interpretation and will vary massively from one setting to the next. And that's all that the mandatory guidance says. There is also some voluntary guidance, and this is much more robust in terms of the actual guidance that we have around what is a balanced and healthy diet. So it does provide a lot more information. The problem with this guidance is that it's voluntary. So settings don't have to follow this. It's not monitored, it's not evaluated, it's not enforced in any way. And so what we find is that actually there's no incentive for settings to comply with that. They may be really conscientious in terms of nutrition. They may really want to prioritize nutrition, but actually having voluntary guidance when there's so much else for earlier settings to take care of and to prioritize, what we find is that nutrition often slips down that agenda quite naturally because early years providers have got so much else to do. And we can't expect everybody to be an expert in nutrition. It's quite complicated. There's a lot of guidance out there that can actually be quite complicated to work out. So what we're doing at Nursery Kitchen is we're really eager to push early years nutrition further up the agenda for government. And we really want to support settings in doing the right thing. And understanding more about nutrition, understanding more about what good food provision looks like in earlier settings. And so earlier this year, Nursery Kitchen launched a campaign which is trying to support the government to create stricter and more enforceable regulations about the food that's served in earlier settings. And the campaign objectives really are for the government to introduce much clearer guidance, stricter guidance, and some guidance that's mandatory, which means that we have to all sit up a little bit more. We have to all pay attention. It's things that then Ofsted or other inspectors can go in and actually assess, have a clear framework that we can assess against, and that we see as a really important step in improving early years nutrition. What we'll do is we're going to put a link into the chat. So if you want to find out more about that campaign, I would really encourage you to click on the link that we're going to share with you this evening, so you can read a little bit more about it, and you can support that campaign too if you want to by following the link. And we hope that that will be a really great way to push early years nutrition up the agenda and to really make a difference. So I want to talk a little bit about our menus as well. We've got some great menus at Nursery Kitchen, and the Seymour House have implemented these brilliantly. And there's a lot to kind of share with you and go through. So some of you may be familiar with our menus already. We have a 3-week rotational menu, which includes everything from breakfast to snacks to lunch and second courses, and tea time and second courses as well. And we're really proud of these menus because what we have done is we've taken all of that national guidance that's available, all of that voluntary guidance, and then we've built on it as well, because we feel that even the voluntary guidance that's out there can still be improved. And as an early years provider and as a company who are providing food to children in the early years, we feel that it's really our responsibility to do the absolute best practice when it comes to early years nutrition. So we have really gone above and beyond all of these guidance, and we've produced these menus which Seymour House are using. And as Hannah kind of mentioned already, we have packed loads of variety into our menus. So we've got different dishes for lunch and for tea across the 3-week menus. We've made sure that we've got variety across the week, so there's no sort of protein source that's repeated on consecutive days or consecutive meals. It's about exposing children to a really wide variety of ingredients and flavours and tastes, as well as all of those nutrients as well that we're offering. Every week of our menus, we have a plant-based day, as Hannah was saying, and that's really important for sustainability, but also for kind of exposing children to those things like beans and pulses and lentils, those really good sources of plant-based proteins. So we have a plant-based food each day, where all of the main meals will be plant-based proteins and plant-based sources of iron. We have a fish day once a week, so that children are getting fish, and that includes oily fish twice across our 3-week cycle, because we know that oily fish is really important for omega-3s and for supporting their cognitive development as well as their physical growth. And what we're really careful to do is make sure that each of these days are rotated each week. So for example, fish isn't always on a Friday, and that's because we want children who attend nursery on different days to be able to benefit from all of these things. So we're really careful to rotate all of that as well. We've got red meat included in our menus because we know that's a really important source of bioavailable iron, which supports growth and cognitive development. So we're really careful to make sure that that is on there as an option as well. We've made sure things like our breakfasts are really varied, our snacks are varied, and include foods from all the different food groups. Our main meals are always really thoughtfully paired with the right kind of side dishes. So we want to make sure that we've got that balance of different food groups. So we're always including carbohydrates, we're including a protein and iron-rich food with every mealtime, and we're always including plenty of fruits and vegetables, as well as some dairy foods. And so what we do is we make sure that we're pairing the main meals with the right sorts of side dishes, so we can really be confident we're getting that right balance in there. We have got second courses at lunch and tea, and this is a really important aspect of the meal as well, because we know that it's a national recommendation to include second courses, and we recognise that using those second courses is a really vital way to top up on energy and top up on nutrients, as well as exposing children to a variety of foods. We're also quite careful about our language. So you'll notice we've called it second courses rather than puddings or desserts. And that's because we're being very thoughtful about that relationship that we're encouraging children to build with their food. So when you say the word pudding or desserts, sometimes we automatically think of something sweet. Sometimes there can be a tendency to kind of use pudding as a reward, or to have some sort of negotiation between the main meal and the second course. And that's something that we don't encourage, and that I know Seymour House practice in their settings. And we have reinforced that by calling this a second course rather than dessert. And in addition to that, actually once a week at both lunch and tea, we make sure that the second course is a savoury option as well, because we want children to learn that pudding doesn't have to be something sweet. It's a useful opportunity to top up on nutrients and energy, but that doesn't mean that it has to be a sweet or a sweetened option. So we've been really careful about, what the dishes that we've chosen, but also about our terminology with these menus as well. So we've got week 1, we've got week 2, we've got week 3. So you can have a look at these. The menus should all be on display on the menu boards in your setting. So you're very welcome to go and take a look at those. And hopefully after this evening, you'll have a better understanding about some of the hard work and the planning that goes in to those menus, but also you'll be able to kind of recognize why some of those dishes are on there and why things are paired together. And you'll see our different oily fish dishes, our plant-based dishes. You'll see what those second courses and all those snacks and things are. So you're very welcome to go and have a look at those. And of course, your feedback is always really important. So please do let us know if you've got any comments on the menus today at the end of the webinar when we take questions, but also share your feedback with staff in the settings as well, because we're always really keen to hear what you think, and always keen to take on new ideas as well. So we're really proud of our menus. We know that they're healthy, balanced and nutritious. We know that they include a variety of foods from the 4 main food groups. We know that they go above and beyond the existing voluntary guidance, those examples that I shared with you earlier on. And we have created our own in-house nursery kitchen nutrition guidelines, because we want to make sure that consistently all of our dishes, when they're prepared, and all of our menus when they're planned, are meeting that guidance but going above and beyond. So we've actually recognised, based on some of that evidence we talked about earlier on, where we know those areas are falling down nationally, things like oily fish, for example, the fibre, the not enough fruits and vegetables. So we've really taken all of that evidence on board and helped use that to help build our in-house nursery kitchen nutrition guidelines. So we've got very robust guidelines that we stick to, and that will apply to all of our dishes and to all of our menus going forward. We think about things like colours of the different foods as well. Marnie, our development chef, is fantastic when she's planning the dishes and she's creating those new dishes and pairing them with sides, that it looks colourful, it looks appealing to the children on the plate. So that's another thing that we take into consideration, and also the diversity of dishes, so making sure that we are representing different cultures and using different ingredients as well, again to improve nutrition but also to improve exposure to foods that some children may not be exposed to at home. All of our menus, all of our dishes are made from scratch with whole ingredients, and Hannah's talked to you a little bit about how we carefully source a lot of those ingredients, and we're really proud that we can create dishes with unprocessed foods and make all of that from scratch ourselves. And the plant points is a really interesting thing. We've probably all heard about the 5 a day message, but plant points kind of builds on that 5 a day message a little bit, and Hannah's mentioned it already. And you might have heard a little bit about some of the benefits around plant points, but it is, like Hannah said, mostly in relation to gut health. And essentially, the more plant points you can include, or the more plant-based foods you can include in your diet, the more sort of prebiotics we have that we can feed that healthy bacteria in our gut. So that really helps to diversify the gut microbiome. So essentially, the more plants you can include in your diet, you're feeding that gut bacteria, you're diversifying your gut bacteria, and you're improving the health of your gut microbiome. And that has huge health benefits for children, but also for adults as well. So this is something we should be paying attention to in our own diets. And in terms of what a plant point is, any fruits or vegetables will count as a plant point. Also, any whole grain foods, those plant-based proteins as well. So the beans, the pulses, the lentils, the legumes, nuts and seeds will also count. And also any herbs and spices will also count towards those plant points. And there was a big study done a few years ago, which demonstrated that this kind of magic number of around 30 plant points, and how the evidence suggested that if you were able to include at least 30 plant points a week in your diet, that has real health benefits in terms of increasing the diversity of the bacteria, healthy bacteria in your gut, improving your gut microbiome, and those health benefits that come with it. So 30 plant points a week is sort of what's recommended on a public health level. And we've analysed our menus, and like Hannah said, we're really proud that each week, so week 1, week 2 and week 3, every week our menus have at least 40 unique plant points every week. So that's something that we're really proud of with our menus. We also pay close attention to portion sizes, and all of the portion sizes of our dishes are worked out based on evidence-based portion size guidance for children of this age range, making sure that when we pair all of our meals and our dishes together across the day of the menu, it will make sure that children are getting enough energy in terms of calories, but also meeting all of those micronutrient and macronutrient requirements as well. And also developing those healthy relationships with food. So it's, as I said, it's not just about the nutrition and those macro and micronutrients, but it is about how we present the food. It's about how we talk about the food. It's simple things and subtle things like calling our second courses instead of puddings or desserts. So we're really mindful of that as well. And we know that nutrition goes much further than beyond the plate. And that's why, you know, doing things like this webinar this evening and doing some training events for staff and really working in partnership with Seymour House to support things like the eating environment and any kind of queries or questions that staff or that you as parents might have. We're really keen to support that whole journey of food when it comes to children. And that's something that we're hoping to do more and more of going forward. So we have created a menu accreditation program, and this is really kind of to recognise that the menus that Seymour House are using and the food that they're serving to children does go above and beyond what the national recommended guidance is. It's kind of a stamp of approval to recognise and reward the nurseries that use our robust nutrition guidelines and are demonstrating that standard of excellence. And we're really pleased to announce that Seymour House are the first partners to receive our bespoke menu accreditation. So this logo with our nutritionist approved 5 stars and big green tick, you'll start to see that in the settings. The certificates will be delivered shortly, and there'll be lots of communication around this. So you'll start to see the certificates appearing in your setting, and you might get some communication about this. So this is to demonstrate that the menus, we know, and we can be really confident in the fact that we are meeting all of the nutritional requirements and the impact that that can have on children's health, and to show that we are going above and beyond those national recommended guidelines, but most importantly that you can feel confident that your children are getting the very best nutrition and the very best food in the settings that they're attending. And we're really keen to work in partnership with parents, and Seymour House are doing a lot of great stuff already in terms of working in partnership with parents. So we know that the home environment can be quite different, and children often eat quite differently at home in comparison to nursery. It's really common for children to eat differently at nursery compared to at home, and there's lots of different reasons for that. You know, the environment is different, all of those mealtime cues are different, the routine might be slightly different. You've got got peer role modelling and staff role modelling at nursery, which might be different to what's happening at home. Also at nursery, there's less room for that sort of pester power, less room for that kind of emotional negotiation almost. They know where the snack cupboard is at home. And that's a really different environment to what they're experiencing at nursery. So there's lots of different reasons, and it's really normal for children to eat quite differently at nursery compared to at home. But we really want to support that home environment when it comes to feeding too. And that's why Seymour House are really continuing to develop their food education programme. They do lots of recipe sharing, and so you can check your food and nutrition notice boards for our menus, but also for recipes as well. And if there's a recipe that you would like to have from one of our dishes and it's not on your food and nutrition board, then please feel free to speak to any of the team at Seymour House for those specific recipes, because we can always access those and share those with you if that's something you would like to create yourself at home. Seymour House also have lobby learning activities, and they will do things like plant to plate activities with the children. They use things like mascots to support some of those reluctant eaters. There's lots of healthy eating activities you might have seen going on in the lobby learning, particularly this week or this month as we're doing Healthy Eating Month at Seymour House. And so if you haven't done so already, please check out some of those lobby learning activities in your setting that are taking place. Seymour House are also offering some drop-in taster sessions. So week commencing the 17th of June, so that's next week, there will be some taster sessions happening in your nursery. So please check out which day that's happening for you. I believe they are happening around pickup time. So it's a chance for you to go in, to taste the food, to see what the food looks like once it's all served up, and to ask the staff questions as well. So a chance for you to sample some of our dishes next week in your settings. And we want to support you further as well. So we're happy to offer kind of future webinars for parents if there's specific topics, whether it's around catering for special dietary requirements, or supporting fussy eaters or picky eaters, or if you want information about healthy snacking. This is all things that we can offer you as a partnership with Seymour House. So please do get in touch with the staff at Seymour House if you would like information, or you've got a specific topic in mind that you would like us to do some extra webinars for. It's a really nice way to kind of extend that service and to make sure that we are really supporting your little ones with the very best feeding journey. In terms of, I mean, I could talk to you all night about things that you can do at home as well, but there's two kind of key things that I think, if I was to share two tips with you about how to encourage your children to try new foods or to engage with foods at home, role modeling and repeated exposure are those two key things. So children, they learn so much from watching us eat. They learn so much from observing, and sometimes actually we don't need to kind of coerce and persuade and push and bribe children to eat, but actually they will learn a lot from watching others. So role modeling is really, really powerful, and there's a lot of that going on in the nurseries as well. So as much as possible, and it's not always easy when you're a working parent or working family, but even if you can just sit down together once a week, and that might be at breakfast time at a weekend, but role modeling can be a really powerful experience for children. If they see you enjoying foods and tucking into new foods, then that's a really good way to help expose them to those foods and to recognize that, you know, eating is a normal part of family life and that you're enjoying the foods yourself, so that can rub off on them. So role modeling is a key thing. And then repeated exposure. So we know that it takes many exposures for children to see a food and have the chance to interact with that food before they will actually consider engaging with that food themselves, let alone actually going ahead and tasting it. So sometimes it can be really frustrating, and I think what I hear a lot from parents often is that, you know, oh, I tried it a few times and they didn't like it, so I just stopped, because no one wants to waste food, right? And that's absolutely fair enough. We don't want to be wasting food, but if we stop exposing children to certain foods, then they never get the opportunity to explore. They never get the opportunity to get curious with that food, and if we take it away, they haven't then got the tools to learn to taste and enjoy that food. So role modeling and repeated exposure are two really key things that we talk a lot about when it comes to food acceptance. So if I was going to share 2 tips with you of what you can do to encourage children at home, then that would be the first 2. But as I say, there's a lot more to it, and there's a lot more that we can talk about, perhaps in a future webinar about food acceptance, if that's something that's interesting to you. So yeah, we're very keen to work in partnership with you guys as well. We're really keen to take your questions today, and to get your feedback on the menus, and also understand if there are additional things that you would like from us as a service as well. So please do share any questions. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we'll see if there's any questions in the chat. But if you do have a question you want to ask live, you're very welcome just to put your hand up and ask it live if you want to turn your microphone on this evening as well. Oh, lots of questions. Right, I'm going to go to the beginning. Will we be able to view the slides recording at a later date? Oh yes, sorry, Lisa's answered that one already. So yes, we are recording tonight's session. So this recording will be shared, and we can give you a copy of the slides as well. What food do you offer for 6 to 12-month-old babies who are being weaned? So yes, that's a great question. Lots of our current dishes are suitable for weaning babies, because all of our dishes contain no added salt and no added sugar. And so we can carefully select dishes from our menu that can then be mashed or blended or pureed to the right consistency for your baby. So often, and Caroline, you might like to answer this a little bit as well, it's really important that when you're weaning that you have clear communication with your key worker and with the nursery manager, so that we know what foods you've already introduced at home, and what foods are appropriate from our menu to be serving. But many of our dishes will be suitable, and we will be extending our weaning offering as well to include some more of those kind of simpler dishes that are suitable for stage 1 babies as well. So that is something that is coming very soon. But as it stands, we have got lots of dishes that will be suitable from an ingredient point of view as well, providing that has been discussed and agreed with you. I don't know, Caroline, if you want to add anything to that.
You've probably answered most of it, Catherine. I'd just say that it's actually really just important to share as much information as you can about what stage your baby's at with regards to weaning, so that we can obviously work with you and ensure that children are being offered foods at nursery that they've perhaps, or particularly allergens that they've tried, ideally at home first. But actually, you know, we very much work in partnership with parents to obviously meet the individual child's needs.
Super. Thanks, Caroline. And we've got a question about breakfast as well. So about the breakfast options, what's the plan to change or widen the breakfast options going forward? So yeah, that's a great question. Hannah, I don't know if you want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think breakfast is quite a tricky time for nurseries because it is a rolling intake. So obviously children coming at different times, that makes it a little bit trickier, but that doesn't mean that we're not looking into other options. All of the cereals that you do serve, that your children are getting, are the best cereals. So they're all, other than the Weetabix, they're the Root Health cereals. There's no added salt, no added sugar, high fiber, whole grain. So they are really good quality cereals. I would say the best you could get. But we're definitely looking into other options, things like overnight oats or potentially porridges, more like savoury things. So it's a project we're actually working on at the moment. So yeah, always keen to hear what people would like to see, and then we obviously have to work out operationally how that works in the nurseries. But yeah, rest assured the cereals that are being served are the best. No added sugar, no added salt, which is very different to a lot of the cereals on the market. They're whole grains and not like ultra processed like a lot of the cereals. Weetabix again is low sugar, low salt, so it is the best option within the cereals. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question, but there is more to be done for sure, we know that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to emphasize that point as well about the cereals that we are using, the ones that we've chosen have been really carefully selected to make sure that they are all low in salt and low in sugar, so that, you know, they fall under the kind of the 5 grams of sugar per 100 grams, and they fall lower than the 0.3 for salt. So we've carefully selected those ones for that reason, and we've tried to vary it across the week. But yes, absolutely, it's something that we can look at expanding. I always say that kind of the menu planning is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. So we put our kind of my nutrition wants and needs together with kind of, you know, what's practical from a production point of view and ingredient point of view. So that, you know, there's the procurement side of it, there's Marnie's side of it from a development point of view, but then also we need to consider what's practical for the setting. So with all the staff at Seymour House, when it gets to them, you know, it needs to be practical from that point of view as well. So it is like getting all of those pieces of the puzzle to fit together, and that's why we're at where we're at currently with breakfast menus. But we are always working to make changes and to widen that variety as much as possible.
Yeah.
We've got a question about corn. So do you use any processed foods such as corn? So corn is a meat alternative. It's highly processed and it can be quite high in salt. So we don't use vegetarian processed alternative dishes like that because it is heavily processed and often they are high in salt. Corn is also quite low in calories, so it often won't meet the nutritional needs that we need protein requirements to meet. So it's low in iron, it's low in calories, but it's high in salt. So it's not a great choice for young children in particular. And that's why we don't use those meat substitutes that are heavily processed. We go for kind of beans and pulses and legumes and seeds as well. We use in some of our dishes because they're much better, more nutritious sources of vegetarian protein. So
yeah, I think we're really passionate about not going down. A lot of businesses you do use those kind of alternative, like those meat alternatives, but yeah, as Catherine said, we go down the kind of lentil legume kind of route. I feel like it's the best, the whole foods basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question here, are there any ultra processed foods in any of the meals? However, assuming not if they're dishes made from scratch. However, there seems to be a recent drive in ultra processed food awareness at the moment. Yeah, there's a huge awareness of ultra processed foods, and as we've just said and Hannah's reiterated, we're really keen to make sure that we're using whole ingredients and we're cooking our dishes from scratch. So we don't use ultra processed foods. With our grocery items, we're really careful to make sure that those are not ultra processed either, and that we are really sourcing ingredients from the very best places, as well as looking at kind of how processed a food is. We're also looking at that nutritional analysis of food. So sometimes you could have an ultra processed food, which, you know, is actually perfectly fine in terms of its nutritional specification, but often ultra processed foods are much higher in added salt or sugar or saturated fat. So we're not just looking at how processed that food is, but we're also looking at that nutritional profile as well, and we will only choose ingredients that satisfy our really strict nutrition guidelines. So no, we're not using things like that. Someone has talked about, do you have any advice to get parents to get kids to eat the same food at home? I touched on this slightly at the end of the presentation, so hopefully that helps a little bit. We can, of course, do more webinars on this topic. I know it's often a big one for nurseries. So we can look at doing some more information on that. There's also second part of your question here is based on portion sizes. Do you think kids should need dinner when they get home? My child tends to want another meal. So the way that our menus are worked out and all of those portion sizes, they should be enough to give them to meet all of those energy needs and to meet their nutritional needs across the day. It's important that we're including that second course at lunch and at tea time to satisfy hunger needs. Every child is different, so it's really difficult. There's always sort of portion size guidance, but of course you will have some children with bigger appetites and some children with smaller appetites. And my main advice would be to feed to appetite. So if you do have children who want an extra snack when they get home, then absolutely you can offer them an extra snack. Essentially from the offering that we're serving with our menus, it will provide 90% of your child's daily energy intake in terms of calories. So that leaves a 10% extra for you to serve at home through a small snack before bedtime, or perhaps that's just even a little cup of milk before they go to bed as well. So yes, if your child needs it at home, then absolutely you can offer that at home. Not all children will. It's very dependent on the individual child. And a question here, as the source of the food has a huge impact on the quality, is the meat factory conventionally raised or free-range grass-fed? Also, is the fruit and veg non-GMO? Would like to know more about your suppliers. Are they locally sourced? That's a Hannah question.
So yeah, as I touched on before, all our meat is UK Red Tractor. Beef and lamb will be grass-fed. Our chicken is UK Red Tractor, and I had some information from the supplier the other day, luckily. But yeah, they are in barns, but they are, they are fed mixed grain, they have access to water, they have pecking materials, so they are treated well. So we have a really high standard. It is not free range, but it is a great standard, and similar to what you would get as a good standard in all the supermarkets. Fruit and veg is non-GMO, and yeah, we source British where possible. It again is very seasonal dependent. Where we can in the summer and we can get the produce from the UK, of course we'll source in the UK. If not, it will come from, like you would when you're buying tomatoes. In other seasons they come from Europe. But we work with a range of suppliers, some around kind of Essex and that kind of area, but kind of all over the UK. But UK where possible in terms of fruit and veg. But yeah, all our meat is UK. And fish is Scottish or Norwegian, again, depending on the season.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Okay, I'm going to whiz through a few more questions. I'm conscious of time, but it's great to have so many questions from you all, so thank you for that. It would be great to hear about how to get the right portion size as they grow. So yes, portion size is another big topic, and perhaps something that we can cover in more depth in a future webinar. There is portion size guidance out there for children of various different ages. It tends to be a range. So we would expect a younger child to have a slightly smaller portion than an older child, but it doesn't always work like that. And like I said, every child is really different. So the food that Seymour House are providing is enough to meet that kind of evidence-based portion size guidance, and there should be the option for children to have second helpings of that main meal as well if they want to. And so children have that sort of that choice and that autonomy to decide whether they want to have second helpings of any of those elements. So the food that we provide should be allowing children to have that. I would say in terms of kind of portion sizes at home, you know your child best, and actually I wouldn't worry too much about kind of weighing out grams of things. The main advice is to feed to appetite. So, serving smaller helpings to begin with can be a great way to avoid overwhelming children. Sometimes when we pile the plate up really high with a big portion that we think they might eat or that we want them to eat can backfire a little bit. So start with really small portions at home. If they're asking for more, absolutely offer them more. There's nothing more erratic than a child's appetite. So you'll know that from experience that it goes up and down depending on illness, growth spurts, but children are generally very good at knowing their own appetite and feeding to meet their energy needs. And that's why we almost need to kind of put our trust in them a little bit. And we can have this guidance, and that's obviously what we use so that we know how much food to prepare and how much food to send out to the nurseries. But ultimately, every child is different, and some days they'll eat more than others. So we have to sort of allow them a little bit of choice with portion sizes. So at home, the best thing to do is to kind of feed to appetite, really. There's a question about custard. Shall I hand this to you, Hannah?
We were talking about custard the other day.
Yeah.
I know we used to serve custard. It just doesn't fit our guidance anymore, I would say. But we are always striving to find stuff that would fit within our guidance. And actually, we have talked about how can we do that. So you never know. Watch this space. Evan might be quite happy at Christmas, you never know. But yeah, it just didn't hit our new nutritional guidance, so we decided to take it off. But we have great things like yogurts and alternative dairy yogurts, which also are delicious.
Absolutely, and more nutritious than the custard
Yeah.
that we used to have. Some comments here about how a webinar on food acceptance would be useful. So yeah, we can get some feedback on that and work on that for you. Someone asked, can you explain a bit more about Rude Health? Hannah, I don't know if you want to talk about Rude Health as a brand.
Yeah, they're just I'm sure many of you have seen them in supermarkets. They're just a really good brand. They're really aligned with our values. They're all whole foods. They have great values, great ingredients. We think they're the best cereals because they are whole grain. They're no added salt, no added sugar. So where we are serving cereals, they are the best, we believe in. They also do snacks, so they do things like rice cakes and some of the new lentil and chickpea crackers that we've got on the menu come from them as well. So definitely a brand that I personally like to use for my 3-year-old because I know that it sits with my values and the business values. So something we've brought into the business.
Great. During the day for drinking, as well as water, is dairy milk offered as a drink in the settings? Caroline, is that a question you can answer?
Yes, yes, the children are offered milk at snack times. So yeah, they are.
Perfect, thank you. And then the same person asked, is there a list of ingredients which go into the dishes? Looking at your menus, I've seen some food that I haven't introduced to my little one and would like to at home before nursery, if possible, to check for allergens at home. And yes, that's a great idea if you're weaning to make sure that you're offering those foods at home first. Absolutely, we have a list of ingredients that go into every dish, so we can absolutely share that with you. And then you can try all of those ingredients before we offer them at nursery.
I love the next comment. If only you work with primary schools too. We know, but we're trying to get in there early to get their preferences in nutrition started from the start of their lives.
Absolutely, early years is important first. How about veggie straws, snacks, biscuits, or fruit puree with coconut yogurt available in the shops for 1 year and 10-month-old baby? Are they okay to consume daily? So yeah, this is a good question. There's lots of different sort of snack foods that are available commercially. Not all of them are nutritionally sound, I would say, for that age. And I guess what we really want to think about, particularly for infants under 12 months, is building food preferences and building food habits that we want children to adopt as they grow. So when we turn to things like some of those more kind of packaged snacks, the biscuits, the veggie straws that sort of are a bit like a baby friendly crisp, it's thinking about those habits that we're starting to instill. So I would say in an ideal world, it would be better to give something like toast fingers with nut butter on, or with hummus on, or a soft cheese spread, or fruits and vegetable sticks, cheese, or plain full fat yogurt that doesn't have all the fruit purees in. And that way, you're really building those foundations very soundly. A lot of the commercially available products, they look really baby friendly and they're very cleverly marketed, but they're not always the best choice, particularly those snack options for little ones. So I would say flip over the package, flip over the packet of these things, have a look at the ingredients list. If there's added sugar in there, or if there's fruit purees or fruit juice added to sweeten these foods, sometimes it doesn't have to say, actually added sugar, but if it tastes really sweet, then we are developing that sweet preference for babies from a really young age. So actually it's a bit about the taste profile as well as the ingredient deck. So yeah, I would say have a really good look at the ingredient list on those packages and make sure that you're really happy with every ingredient that's in there. There's just a few more questions. I know we're over time, but I'm just going to make sure that we can answer all of these. If people need to go, then that's absolutely fine. How do you control portions in the classroom? my daughter loves the cheesy peasy pasta and it feels like it would be quite unhealthy or calorie dense. Our kids serve smaller portions of this and a second helping is offered. So all of our dishes are nutritionally balanced. We've taken care of that food group for you. We have information about kind of the overall energy intake of all of these dishes as well, and they're all balanced across the week. So we would, for any of our dishes, the same portion size advice would apply regardless of what that dish is. And we would, if the child is requesting second helpings, we would absolutely encourage staff to offer second helpings of that dish. There's no need to kind of restrict necessarily depending on what ingredients are in that food. They are all balanced and across the week. Everything balances out, so I wouldn't be worried about restricting that. So I hope that helps to answer that question. Do you recommend any yogurt brands? Not necessarily on the whole. I can let Hannah talk about the brands that we have chosen and why we've chosen those. I would say in terms of at home, a plain natural yogurt is best, one that doesn't have added sweeteners, one that doesn't have added sugar, or that ideally doesn't use fruit purees and fruit juices to sweeten that taste as well. It would be a much better option to go for a plain natural full fat yogurt that you could then add your own chopped fruits or fruit pieces to if you wanted to. I don't know, Hannah, if you want to add anything about our yogurt brands.
Yeah, I mean, we just used a plain natural yogurt again. We moved away from a fruit sweetened yogurt maybe 18 months ago, 2 years ago, because we just felt exactly what Catherine's saying, is a plain yogurt is the right thing to do, to serve it with fresh fruit or a poached fruit. But yeah, just any plain yogurt. We use a brand called Marshwood Farm, not one you can get in the supermarkets, but any of the the decent plain yogurts in the supermarket, it's fine, Greek or not.
Absolutely. And then a question here, my child is vegetarian. How is Nursery Kitchen taking care of vegetarian menus nutritionally for iron, for example? Really great question, actually. So yes, for vegetarian children in particular, we are even more focused on iron. There are some really great vegetarian sources of iron in terms of the beans, the pulses, lentils, chickpeas. We use hummus in snacks as well, falafel, our pakoras. We've also, some of our dishes contain seeds. So we're really focused. I mean, we talk a lot about vegetarian sources of protein. In actual fact, it's the iron that we're really keen on with those vegetarian dishes. So we make sure that all of our vegetarian or our vegan dishes do have a source of vegetarian protein and iron. And the other thing that we do is make sure that, I mean, all of our dishes are really high in veg anyway, but when we pair fruits and vegetables with vegetarian sources of iron, the vitamin C that is in the fruits and the vegetables really helps with the iron absorption from those vegetarian sources. And so that again is where our menus are quite cleverly paired together. So if we've got vegetarian dishes, we, number one, make sure that there's a vegetarian sources of iron and protein in there, but number two, we make sure that that's paired with fruits and vegetables so that we're doing the very best to then enhance the absorption of that iron. So that's taken care of with all of our vegetarian dishes, because yeah, we know that's a key thing. And the same with the meat sources of iron as well. They'll always be paired with fruits and vegetables anyway. So we really want to make sure that we're boosting all of that iron absorption.
That's something that comes up in our food meetings every week. Catherine's very passionate about it, so yeah,
it
will always be iron rich in all of our dishes, yeah, because we know how important it is.
Absolutely, particularly for this age range. So yeah, I'm always banging that drum. Final question here, then we'll take this one, and then I think it will be time to log off and give you all your evenings back. Which oils are used for cooking, Hannah?
Should do that one. Yes, so we use a mix of, we use veg oils, we use olive oil, and we use coconut oil. So depending on the dish we're cooking, for more of the kind of curries, we'll use the vegetable oil. Some of the Italian dishes have olive oil used as a base and added in for kind of richness. And then coconut oil we use in our like OT crunch crumbles that like binds the topping together. So it's quite a nice mix. So we know definitely olive and coconut are really amazing sources of fat. So and veg is a great oil for cooking when you need a high temperature. So yeah, a mix.